All right, so because the rest of this course is going to be online, I've decided to go ahead and record some video lectures that are going to cover the content that we would have covered face-to-face in class. There's going to be a couple small demos, and I'm also going to use this video to actually go back and take a look at week 2 and week 3's content. I'll try to put a timestamp or split these into multiple videos so you have an idea of which content that you should look at. But I figured this would be best for anyone who missed that content, and then I can also use these videos in the future if I need to. So I'm going to start with week 2 and looking at the audio basics, and then we'll go and recap week 3, and then I'll move to week 4 and 5's demos. Alright, so this is just a small introduction to working with audio. Usually you'll want to use Audition if you want to actually record audio. You can actually use dynamic linking to actually edit audio in Audition via Premiere. And so these two programs actually work really well. But with the first project and then really the second and the third, there may be reasons why you might want to edit some of your audio, especially if you're trying to use different audio tracks and you want to go and try to remove noises or just kind of change the volume. So before you actually change anything, it's good for you to have just a very basic fundamental knowledge of working with audio. So the definition of sound in general is energy transmitted through pressure waves, vibrations, in a medium consisting of a frequency, that's the amount of time, and an amplitude, which is the power energy component. So the frequency, when you think of frequency, you can think of frequent. It's the rate which something occurs, and it refers to the number of back and forth cycles of vibrational motion of particles per unit of time. Since sound has periodic vibrations, this is the frequency that a sound vibrates. This is going to be measured in a unit called hertz, and this is going to be what you think of when you think of the pitch of a sound. So if it's a higher pitch or if it's a lower pitch, it's going to change the hertz. So before we go much further, we really want to take a look at a wavelength. A wavelength is one complete cycle of sound. This is what we count when we count the vibrations of a sound. Now, usually when we think of a complete cycle, we might think of a circle, like a clock, where we start at the beginning and then we go all the way around and then we complete the cycle by going to the end. Because we are editing and looking at something that is a recording over time, we can't go all the way around. So essentially what we're doing is we're starting here, and then we are moving forward through time, and then we get to a certain point where we can't travel back in time, and so instead we're going to travel up and over, and then we're going to cross the zero axis, and then we're going to do sort of a mirrored view of that. So this is just a visual representation showing the value of this waveform over time. So hertz, the number of cycles per second. Human hearing is only in a range of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So 20 hertz is 20 waveforms per second. I used to have my classes listen to one of those audio tests. You can find one on YouTube, and you can actually test your hearing and you can figure out where your own personal hearing range comes in and ends based off of those different pitches. Amplitude is how powerful the sound waveform is, or the extent to which air particles are displaced in response to the energy of a sound. It's going to be measured in decibels and sound pressure levels. So here we have a picture of two different waveforms. One of them is a lot shorter, and so the amplitude is less. It's not displacing the particles as much, versus this one has a lot higher of an amplitude. So loud isn't really a great word because everyone's definition of loud is different, but the volume of this amplitude is going to be a lot louder, and then the amplitude of this is going to be a lot quieter. So decibels are kind of a different unit. It's a logarithmic unit. Here it says the logarithmic unit of sound intensity, 10 times the logarithm of the ratio of the sound intensity to some reference intensity. All you really need to take into consideration is that it's not quite a typical unit where you just count like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be logarithmic. Also, each time you're on a different system, the decibels might be a slightly different ratio. Each system you're on might have a slightly different definition of what the 0 point is actually going to be. So you're going to kind of have to take into consideration based off of what you're looking at. The main thing you want to take away from this is that you're going to be measuring the volume in decibels. So if you think that the sound is too loud, you want to decrease the decibels. If you think it's too quiet, you want to increase the decibels. So there are several different audio file formats that you want to use. I usually suggest using a WAV file or an AIFF file. I've noticed that MP3 files can sometimes have issues with being brought into Premiere Pro or After Effects. So here we have kind of 3 major groups. Uncompressed would be like your WAV files, lossless compression, and then lossy compression, which would be like your MP3 files. So try to stick to WAV files or AIF files. I'm going to skip this. This is getting a little bit advanced. I don't think we really need to worry about codecs. But if you want to read up on this, you can. Different audio export settings. So some things to consider. Sample rate, the higher it's going to be, the better. So 5 kilohertz, barely acceptable for speech. 11 kilohertz, the lowest recommended quality for a short segment of music, and quarter the standard CD rate. 22 kilohertz is a popular choice for web playback and half the standard CD rate. 44 kilohertz is the standard CD audio rate, and then 48 kilohertz is standard for DVDs. We're at a point where probably most of your recording equipment is going to be 44 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz, but I would stick to those two. Sample size, bit size, it's the number of binary digits for each sample. The higher is also the better, usually 8, 16, or 24. There's going to be different ways of recording, so depending on what you're recording with, like if you are using so there's going to be a couple of different ways for you to record. So this is a portable audio recorder, and something you'll notice, there's 2 microphones on it. One of them is going to record left, one of them is going to record right. Depending on the equipment you have, this might look a little different. I've used these before where they basically kind of crisscross in how they point, and they're going to record left and right. And that's going to allow for you to have stereo audio, so that way when you are listening back, you can hear one audio channel through a left headphone or a right headphone or a left speaker or a right speaker. If you are recording mono, it's going to record the same audio and it's just going to duplicate it both on left and right channels. Bitrate specifies the output bitrate of the audio. Generally, higher bit rates increase both quality and file size. This is going to be measured bits per second. We're getting to a point where we don't have to worry so much about file size. It used to be that depending on your files, you would maybe have to consider whether or not you wanted a nicer quality file or if you wanted to try to save space. Nowadays, it's really easy to record high quality audio and video without having to sacrifice that. All right, so that's just a bit of an overview about audio. I also have this link here, which is going to take a look at different audio effects and transitions. I'm going to let you look through this, but there are going to be different effects that are based off of different types of groupings. So here you'll see amplitude and compression. So again, if we think about amplitude, amplitude is going to be changing the volume. So we can look at amplifying. Here we have channel mixers, channel volume, de-esser. So there's going to be certain words that people have a tendency to over enunciate, especially if they don't have like a pop filter or a windbreak on their microphone. And one of them is having words with S's and T's in them, sibilances. So you can use a de-esser to try to get rid of the t's and t kind of sounds. Let's see, dynamics. I'll let you kind of go through these. Delay and echo. So these are going to create different delay, echo kind of sounds. Filter and equalizer. For the most part, we're going to not worry about these. You can go into these more in kind of higher level classes where we can actually work specifically with Audition. Usually I suggest doing kind of small changes in Premiere and then doing larger changes in Audition. A high pass or a low pass filter can help remove certain frequencies that are either below or above a certain cutoff point. This could be really helpful if you have, like, let's say you have a recording and you have just like a really high-pitched sound in the background that was very well isolated from everything else. You could cut off audio in that range and just kind of clean that up. Phaser, this is something that could help if you accidentally had two microphones where they're both recording audio and maybe they're just slightly off phase with each other. Noise reduction, this is going to be really helpful. So there's going to be automatic click remover. This could be really helpful if you had, like, let's say a ceiling fan or something and it was making a constant clicking sound. Dehummer could help with background fan noises. De-noise in general just kind of help clean up and kind of sample general ambience noises that you have. Reverb is going to be the sound as it is bouncing off the environment and dissipating, and so by changing the reverb you can change the sound quality of the environment that you're in. Here we have pitch shifter, and then these are saying these are obsolete. Crossfade. So here we actually get to certain transitions where you could have your audio crossfade into another audio clip. And then I've gotten questions in the past about different keyboard commands. So if you want to try to improve your workflow, you can definitely use these to kind of help you learn kind of shortcuts. So I'm going to open up Premiere and I'm going to just overview real quickly working with audio, and then we'll move on to week 3's content. I'm going to download this file again. All right, so I'm going to make a project called Week 2. I'm gonna make sure I put this on the desktop. I'm gonna hit OK. And this is noticing that my audio hardware has changed, so I'm gonna just double check this should be fine. So I'm gonna bring this castle smoke in. So an overview real quick, I think I did a fairly good job of kind of showing everything in the first video. So if you need to, you can go back and refresh yourself on that. But if you double click on your file, you can preview it. This is really the week where you are working on your first project and editing everything. So you might need just a bit of a refresher. So double click, we can preview. If we want to bring this into our timeline, we can. Some of you may have recorded footage vertically or might have footage that's vertical. So what you'd want to do if we didn't want to have this dimension, this aspect ratio, is we'd want to go to sequence settings, and then we can choose certain settings, or I could just go here and instead of this number I could do like 780, and this is going to be more of a standard dimension. And before we go much further, I'm going to take a look real quick at our settings. So at the top we have our different workspaces. You can use effects. I like editing. I'll show you how I kind of move things around. I like to start with editing and then kind of swap it a little bit. We looked through these menus before, but I'm going to just go to workspaces and remind you that you can reset your layout if you don't like how it's changed. You can also save a layout, or you can look for different panels if you're having a hard time finding them. View, graphics, markers, sequence settings, that's where we just went to change our settings. Clip, we can change information about a particular clip. You can also see a lot of these by right-clicking on this as well. So there's going to be multiple ways for you to do different things. Edit, file, save as, export. So in this top we have our source panel. We have our different effects. So if I have a file selected here, I'll be able to look at the different effects on it. I'm going to minimize these real quick because usually you'll see these minimized first. So something else you might want to do, let's say you have a vertical file you recorded on your phone, you've changed your sequence settings. Something else you might want to do is go to motion, click on this little kind of triangle on the right, or on the left, sorry. And we have a couple different settings: position, scale, rotation, anchor point. So position is going to let you move this file using the X and Y axis. The X and Y values. Scale is going to let you change the size. So I can make this smaller or larger. Rotation is going to rotate your file, so you can rotate it to the left, you'll have a negative value. To the right, you'll have positive value. If you go past 360, you'll actually have revolutions, and then you'll have degrees. So I could just type in 90, for example. So if I accidentally recorded this as vertical, I could maybe move this to one side, maybe add some text here. Maybe find some other things that you could put in this space to just help fill it up. So this is going to be kind of up to you how you want to do this. I'm going to click on this again. see if I can scale it up a little bit. We'll go over some of these other things again in a little while, but motion is going to be where you can move those things around just a bit. So mostly what I wanted to look at for this is going to be working with your audio. So if we click on the next tab, we have the audio clip mixer. I can click on the file here. I'm going to use these handlebars down here to actually zoom in a little so I can see the waveform better. And I can play through and check out what the volume is going to look like at the highest points. So it doesn't look too bad. You want to make sure that your audio isn't getting to a point where it's in the red. Let me see if I can find a picture of this. So if you record your audio and it's too loud, what happens is the waveform actually gets cut off and you lose that information. It basically gets distorted. So even if you bring the volume down in post-production, you don't have the same quality as what you would have if you recorded it at a lower volume. So you do want to check your audio settings when you're recording, especially when you have more control and you're working with a proper microphone and everything. But this is kind of a good example of what happens is we have this square cut off. You see the same thing here. Like here we have these different samples, and where the waveform would have gone up above the line, it's just chopped off. So there's not a whole lot you can do in post-production. You can bring the volume down, but you just want to be careful. And then when you are working with your audio, you want to make sure that your volume is not too quiet. If it was way down here in the green, then it would be too quiet. And you really want to make sure that you look at these levels. You don't just take into account what your headphones sound like, because your headphones could be set to anything. I often have people whose audio ends up being really quiet, and a lot of it's because, you know, if you're recording from your phone's probably further away from you, and so it's not really equipped to capture that sound. So you might find yourself really needing to change the volume. Like if all of your volume's way down here, it's definitely too quiet. So what you can do to change this volume is go to the audio clip mixer, and you can move this slider. This is going to change that decibel volume. So I could bring this way up here, and you'll notice it's getting into this red. That's really not a good thing. We might bring it down a little bit. This is still getting a bit too loud. You really don't want to have too much in the orange either. That's not too bad. Kind of -6, -12 is kind of a good range. So that way your loudest parts of your video are going to be there, but they're not getting close to being in the red. Something else you'll notice up here is we have the left and right channels. So if you wanted to set one track to being the left channel or the right channel, you could. So you can essentially pan one way or the other, or you can just leave it. Something else that you might want to try doing when you're working with these is if you right click and you go to unlink, this will actually separate your audio from your video. So you might want to record and use the audio from one piece, and then maybe bring in, maybe you're talking about your hobbies and you want to have pictures of your different hobby. You could overlay that over top of your audio and not have to bring it in separately. You could also mute a track if you wanted to. So what you're going to really want to do is bring in your files use the razor tool to cut these into pieces. If you've unlinked your files, you're going to have to make sure you cut both the audio and the video. And then you're going to use your selection tool to essentially remove pieces, maybe order them in a different order if you wanted to. You can put pieces on different tracks. Whatever is going to be highest is going to cover the other one. So to show you this, I'm going to change the position. So you can have multiple files all on the screen at the same time. You could even have these kind of covering each other. Once you've cut apart these different files, you can still bring some of this back. So as long as there's files to the left or right, you could stretch these back out. So these are all just shortcuts. They're not permanently gone if you cut them. I'm going to go over exporting your files. So now that we have this, we want to just double check that we don't have anything to the right. I'm going to go to File, Export Media. We want to choose H.264. This is going to turn it into an MP4 file. I want to click on where I'm saving this. I don't want to accidentally oversave this. I might just change this to Project 1. Hit Save. We want to export these. We can go ahead and match the source, so that way it matches the files you brought in. Or if you didn't want to do that, you could do YouTube 720p HD would be fine. And we're going to hit export. If we were using the computer lab, I would suggest using the queue. I really like using Media Encoder, but in case you don't have Media Encoder downloaded, export is going to be the easiest option because it's just going to export directly in Premiere Pro. Alright, so that finished exporting. I can see it right here. I'm going to go over working with YouTube. So if I sign into YouTube, which you should be able to just use your student email, I'm going to hit create a video, upload. Here I can select my file, Project 1. Now for this, we can just let it upload a thumbnail, playlist we don't need to worry about. You can choose if it's made for kids or not. Mine's not particularly aimed at them. I'm gonna hit next. Next. So it's up to you. You can either do public, which will make it so people can search for it, or you can do unlisted, which means that only people with the link can see it. But if people try to just type in, let's say, Project 1 self-portrait, they're not going to be able to find it. So you need to choose either one of these. If you set it to private, I'm not going to be able to see it degrade. Then you can also choose if you want it scheduled or not. I'm going to hit save. Now there's going to be two parts to this. The video needs to upload, and then once it's uploaded, it basically goes into a queue, and then depending on how much traffic YouTube has, it will publish your file. So if it's a really long video, it might take a while. Like if I'm doing an hour-long video lecture like this, Usually it takes a good hour or so for it to upload and then to also publish. So you don't necessarily want to do these all at the last minute when you're turning in your work. This one's pretty short, so it shouldn't take too long, but you'll notice it is taking several minutes. Alright, so it's been 99% processed. Standard definition version of your video needs to finish processing before your video is unlisted. So I can hit close. So it's going to take a while. And it looks like it's already published. If I hit play, I can see the video. So we have the unlisted here. You can copy this link here, or you can go to share. And if you copy this, you'll want to put that as a link or a comment when you are submitting your homework. So you don't have to actually submit the file, you're just going to upload it to YouTube, and then you're going to copy the YouTube link to turn in your work. Alright, so that's going to end the overview for week 2. Now I'm going to go into the work that we looked at for week 3. To start off with, you're going to want to go to Canvas to week 3 and go to Titles and Effects. Here I have a link to files that I have saved onto my Google Drive space. This is just because the files, it's larger. It's really not possible to easily put it on Canvas, so this is going to make it easier. You can't preview it, but just go ahead and hit download. Download anyway. Then save that. So while that's going, we can take a look at the next 2 projects. So titles and effects. Objective: using video clips applied in class, you'll capture and re-edit these clips, demonstrating your ability to add titles, transitions, effects, and still imagery. Additionally, you will be supplied several audio tracks in which you will edit your video to. The pacing and flow of your video files should harmonize and be paced to your audio track. Note, this is not a group assignment, and your project should contain unique and distinctive elements. That's within reason. A lot of times the projects end up being very similar just because you're given the same content, so I'm not really worried about it. But try to think of ways that you can express yourself through this project. First, you're going to want to make copies of the files, so you'll want to download them, save them. Next, you'll want to take a look at the files and review them in Premiere. That's what we'll do next. I do want you to create a paper edit list. It doesn't have to be on a literal sheet of paper. You can write these in a Word document and submit them, or submit them as a comment when you're turning in your work. But you will need to document where you are editing these files. I have a list of requirements down below. You don't have to put a notation for every single edit that you do, because you'll probably do more than what's required. But for the ones that I do want you to have, you need to write those down. So write down each edit, how it functions, and approximately the time that it happens at. You are going to want to edit your files, improving on the rhythm and the pacing. So I'm going to give you a couple of different audio files to listen to, and you are going to try to create your edits so that way they match with the rhythm and pacing of the music. Make use of transitions and effects to heighten or stylize the piece. Think of ways to unify throughout time. I'm giving you a bunch of very random video clips, and so it's going to be kind of up to you to try to create different themes and kind of make it feel like everything is unified. It's not going to be perfect because everything is so random, but I want you to try to think about how you can create themes throughout. Make edits that match the audio track, listen to the beats, volume, and pacing, and find ways to visualize that information with your editing. So if the sound is increasing, maybe something else on the screen is increasing, like the size of the clip that you're looking at. Maybe you're zooming in, maybe the color is changing, so that way it matches. Create a title and credits for the piece and place it at the beginning and end of the video. This is your opportunity to practice with text if you haven't added text already. So a title, you can just create your own title, or you can call it Project 2, titles and effects. Credits, you can put your name, you can put the class, you can put the name of the song. You don't have to worry about crediting every single clip that you used. For this one, you probably aren't going to be able to upload it to YouTube just because it does have some copyrighted material. So instead, I'll have you upload it directly to Canvas instead. It's going to be such a small file that shouldn't be a problem. And then make sure that you include your edit list in some way. So your requirements are going to be your titles and credits, color adjustments as needed, so that's going to be up to you how many you use, 4 transitions, 2 video effects, 1 speed duration change, 1 instance of 2 video track overlays using opacity and blend modes. If you've used Photoshop before, it's similar to working with the opacity and blend modes in Photoshop. And then your video should be at least 1 minute long. You can cut it off right at the 1 minute point, or you can just use the whole audio track. It's kind of up to you. So I'm going to take a look at titles and effects. Bring this over. You're going to want to right click on it and go to extract all. Might take a little while. And while it's going, I'm going to create a new project. We'll call this Project 2. Close out that sequence. We can actually create a new sequence. Now, if you open up this file, we have a bunch of subfolders. I will warn you, I've copied these files several times back and forth from Mac and PC, and some of the files don't quite work. You'll notice that you may see some of these kind of empty files. Just ignore these. I need to go through some time and clean these up and get rid of all this stuff, but we do have some different categories. So architecture, there's some different videos of buildings, babies. Here's a bunch of shots of different feet. In my own defense, I'll just say I didn't find these videos. I inherited these from one of my professors, so I'm not the reason why there's such weird footage. And something you'll notice, a lot of these are very small, and then they're also a different aspect ratio than what we've been working with. So that's something to take into consideration. They're all a 4:3 ratio. So here we have a bunch of dancers, exercise. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use Control A to grab all of these, and I'm gonna just import all of them and dump them into Premiere. It's gonna just take a second. And if you get a message like this, this is probably for those files that aren't working anyway, so we can just hit OK. So you have your sequence here. I would suggest first go to audio, and you'll notice that these are each going to be in their separate folders. So we have our sequence, and then we have the folder here. If you double click on it, you'll see the files inside. If you want to go back to a previous file, you can click on this button. It'll let you go into the next one. I can again hit back. If you want to preview these as a list, you can switch. That might make it a little easier. We're going to take a look at the audio. You'll notice that there's a folder called WAV files. And what I tried to do for these is I tried to pick some soundtrack audio files so that way they would pair well with visuals rather than just kind of standard music. So for example, one of the most obvious examples would be 2001: A Space Odyssey. You've probably heard this a lot. You hear it a lot of the time in commercials and stuff. But this one has a very slow sort of build up, and then it has this very heavy orchestral music that comes in. So you could really think about these beats. You'll notice this audio is very loud. You might have to go in and do some adjustments. So for example, I might have to click on this, bring this down a little bit. It's not so bad now, kind of around the -6 point. So go through, take a look at these, kind of listen to them, figure out which one you're sort of interested in the rhythm of. What I like about using the waveform is you can kind of use this as an actual visual guide to see. So here we have a lot of these beats that you can kind of look at. So you kind of want to try to use these points to match the audio. You don't have to create a perfect match, but you just want to think about the qualities of the sound. So one like this, like the Ghostbuster theme or the bubbles, they're kind of faster paced. So these might be ones that you want to use kind of faster movements. I've seen a lot of people use like this file, the Shank Redemption, Godfather, more for kind of more narrative pieces. So it's gonna be up to you. So I'm gonna take my audio file, and then you're going to go through these different files, grab different clips, and we only need a minute. So if you wanted to go ahead and cut this down to about a minute. You could go ahead and do that. It doesn't really matter exactly at what point. So I'm going to just put a couple of different clips on here. They're all really short. All right, so you'll notice first of all that they're all very small. So you'll want to go to the effect controls, select the file. And this is where it can be a little tricky. You want to make sure that your playhead is lined up with the one that you actually have selected. If your playhead is somewhere else, but you have this selected, you'll still make changes to it, but you won't see it because you're not on that time. So I'll want to make sure I have this selected. You might have looked earlier in the video, but if you skipped ahead to this point, you can use the effect controls and what you have selected to change some values based off of the motion. So this is where you can go to position. We could position these wherever we want. So the left value is going to change the left-right position. The second one is going to change the vertical position. Scale, we can zoom in. So we might want to move this towards the center and zoom in. If you want to, you can type in values just by clicking on it. So maybe I want to do a 400. You can also rotate your file. So if you recorded your footage vertically, or if you wanted to rotate it, you can rotate it. Maybe I want to rotate it a little bit, change the scale so it fits again. Anchor point. So I'm trying to find a picture that shows this. Usually I draw this on the board. This kind of shows it. So the anchor point by default is in the center of the image. So when it rotates around that point. You can change the anchor point, and it basically looks like this does here, where if you change the anchor point to be where a corner is, it's instead going to rotate around that point instead of kind of around the center of the object. So like here, there's this picture of this anchor, and there's the X here, so it's going to rotate exactly around that point. It's not really a great picture demonstrating, so hopefully you get an idea of what that would look like. So I could actually change this though. You notice when we rotated it, it's rotating from the center. So I can move this anchor point, and we can't actually see the point itself, but if I rotate it, you'll notice it's rotating at a point that's outside of the image instead of in the actual image. So this isn't something that we really need to worry about now while the picture is static, but it is something that we might want to use later when we are animating and using motion graphics. So those are our motion values. Now we have opacity, and to really get the best use of opacity, we're going to want to stack some of these images over top of each other, but we can just take a look at it now. In a later part of this video, we're going to use these tools here. Here we have the ellipse, the square, and the pen tool. That's going to allow us to create a mask. For now, we're just going to look at opacity where we have 100%. So if we change this down to 0, it's basically making it completely see-through. We could set this to, say, 50. That means we have 50% of the background showing through, 50% of the image showing through. We can change the blend modes. Whoops. We can change the blend modes. They're sort of broken up into different categories. These look at the 50% or darker values. These look at the 50% or lighter values. And then these work with them, kind of the mid-ranges. And then we have different color effects. So to see this, I'm going to move this one up, shift this one over, so we can actually see what happens when these are over top. So here I have darken multiply, color burn. I'm going to actually knock this to 100%. You can look up descriptions. You can look up descriptions for these, but I think it's easier just to play around with them and get a feeling, because it's going to change a lot depending on the files that you're working with in particular. So I might actually make this one a little larger to be able to see a little clearer. Maybe I want to position this over here. So you'll see this is going to get a little bit crazy. You don't necessarily have to have everything fill the screen. You could have multiple files all on the screen at the same time. Next, we're going to take a look at working with different effects. So it might be a little hard to find. We're essentially going to go to this bottom left where we have project and all of these, and you'll click on this double arrow until you find effects. And here we have our menu for all of the different effects. What I usually like to do is I like to grab this tab and drag it and drop it over in the right. And then just kind of resize that. That's just going to make it easier to see it, and that way I can leave everything over here so I can browse my files. Where's my bin? So we can browse our files here if we want to still, but I can apply the effects. So effects are kind of broken down into a couple different sections. There are different presets. There are some that are based off of like very particular effects, like we have lens distortion removal. This could be really great, like if you have a GoPro camera, you'll notice that it often has like a fisheye lens look to it. This will try to help remove some of that. If you were wanting to create the look of a particular type of film, you could use some of these presets to help with that. For the most part, we're going to ignore the presets. There are different audio effects, so this is where you could go and you could, in the earlier part of this video, we talked about removing certain sounds, like applying a de-esser to remove the S's and the T's, the sibilances. So if you needed to, you could apply that. Since this is music, we shouldn't really need to do anything to the audio. We're mostly just working with the video. But this is where you could apply some of those things. Audio transitions, you can crossfade if you have multiple files. So we're going to start by looking at video effects. They're broken up into a bunch of different sections, and again, I would suggest just kind of looking through on your own. So we have adjustments. So if you wanted to change the levels, I'm going to click on the effect, drag it to the exact clip that I want, and then you'll notice that this is actually going to pop up in the left. So here we have effect controls. So levels is going to allow for me to change the black and white levels of the different channels. So here I have RGB, the black input level, the white input level, the RGB black output level, white output level, and then we're breaking them down by red, green, and blue. If you do not like one of the effects that you have applied, you maybe want to change and use something else, you can click on the effect. So in this case, this one's called levels, and I can hit delete, backspace, and remove that. Blur, we could add a Gaussian blur. So here I could change the amount of blur and change the direction. So each one is going to have a different setting. You're not going to necessarily know what's going to happen until you click on it. Color correction, this is where you're going to do your adjustments. So I said that you're going to need to do color adjustments as needed. That's up to you what you want to do. I'm not going to control that, but I would suggest using them because this is going to come in handy when you're making videos. Let's say that you recorded and your video is very washed out. You could use the brightness and contrast, apply it, and you could essentially change, make it a little darker, maybe add a little more contrast if you needed to. You can apply change color. This can change the hue of your file. You can change the saturation if you wanted to. You could change to a particular color. Now this image is black and white, so we're not really going to see a whole lot. We could try this out on the baby instead. You'll notice we're mostly isolating these kind of particular spots. Distortion. These ones can be really handy. Corner pin I really like. Let's say that you had a video recording of your computer screen or something and you wanted to make it look like somebody was watching a video that actually wasn't on the screen. You could use this to create that illusion. So I'm going to go down, so we have our brightness, contrast still, we have our change color. So these are always going to stay here, so you can go back and you can change them again, or you could delete them. So what this does is it changes the location of these corner points. So you can change the location. So I can essentially skew this, change the perspective on it, and maybe make it look like it actually lines up with something else in the background. So that you could create a fake video or something where somebody's supposedly watching something. You could have it look like it's going off into space. Here there's going to be some effects where you can generate something, so we could create a lens flare. These are really popular in film, so you could create a little lens flare on here. Keying we're going to take a look at later, either in this video or I'm going to create a new video for the next demos, because this one's getting a little long. But we're going to use this to green screen. Perspective, stylize, transition. So I'm going to just let you kind of go through these, but they're all going to be applied the same way. You're going to drag them, drop them, and then change them using this effect controls. So that's going to be primarily what you're going to do. Video transitions are going to be applied to different files where they meet. So we can take a look at these. So here we have cube spin. A lot of these look like these sort of transitions you'd see in a PowerPoint or like one of the old Star Wars movies. I would say use these and try to get them out of your system. A lot of them look really cheesy. There's some really great directors who have been able to create very nice seamless transitions by using some of these in very clever ways. But a lot of time when you see them, they almost end up being distracting and taking you out of what you're watching. I'm just going to go ahead and apply this. So you might get an error message. I'm just going to hit OK. It should be fine. It's telling me that my files are pretty short, which they are. But you'll notice it's still doing what it says that it's supposed to. So here it looks like it's a cube and it's rotating around. So you'll notice that I have the actual transition here. It's this little box and I can click on it and again go to effect controls and I can see information about it. So this says image A spins to reveal image B mapped onto two faces of a cube. I can change the duration of it, so this happens over about a second. Here it's aligned, so it either centers at the cut point. I can start it at the cut, end it at the cut. You can also choose the start and end points. You can reverse it. So in this case, the cube is going kind of the other direction. These settings will be a little bit different depending. And if you don't like the transition you added, you can select it, hit delete, backspace, and you can remove it. So I could go to dissolve, cross dissolve is a good one. I'm gonna again get an error. So what's gonna happen here is it's basically going to start with 100% of one file. It'll slowly transition. In the middle will be 50%, both of them. And then by the end it'll be 100% of the one. So it slowly looks like it changes by essentially changing the opacity over time. So this one, you'll notice it doesn't have as many settings just because it's so straightforward, but I can change where it starts and ends at. So going back to our requirements, we have titles and credits. To do that, you're going to use the text tool. So you're going to click on the T for text. If you click and hold down, there's going to be a horizontal type and then vertical type. So if you want to change your text to go vertically, you can. This is probably the part that frustrates people the most. You can add your text here, and it's going to be a lot of going back and forth between the text tool and the pointer tool. So one thing that I like about the text here is we can click on it and drag it around. Sorry, my computer's being a little laggy. You'll notice that we have our graphic up here. It's been added as new line, so I could move this over. By default, it's going to be a certain duration of time, but you can actually resize this if you want. You'll notice a similar thing with photos. They're gonna come in at a certain length, but you can just resize it. So here I have my text title. If I wanted to, I could even have this line up. I could take this file, create a transition. So I could so here I have my text. I can move it around by using the selection tool. If I want to go back and modify it, I'm going to need to click on the type tool and then try to be careful to actually select inside of the box. If you click outside of it, you're going to create these other instances. This ends up just being more annoying than anything. You'll notice it's not adding anything down here. I do have that box that I could select on, but really it's just this section here. I could potentially type in more text and then work with both of these. They would still be treated like they are the same graphic. So if you wanted to have them sort of grouped together, you could do this. So in some ways it's helpful, but sometimes it can be a little challenging to get used to. So I'm going to use this text here. I'm going to do Control A to highlight it. Again, if we go to Effects and Controls, we can actually change our text options. So here by default it's to Homa. I can switch to a different text if I wanted to. I could switch. Now, depending on the one, you might have other options for like regular or let's find one that's going to be more standard. So here we have Arial. Now we can change if we want it to be italic, if we want it to be bold. We can change the size. You can also change if you want it to be centered, left aligned, right aligned. You can change the amount of spacing between the letters. You can change the line height. That's going to be more obvious if you have the text on a new line or not. Here we can change, and I'm gonna highlight this again. I can change the fill, so I could change the color. So that's gonna change it to red. I can apply a stroke. I'm gonna make this larger so it's easier to see. That's a little bit big, but we'll do like 10. I can add a background if I want to. I could add a shadow. A shadow might help with making it stand out a little bit. You can also position it, scale it, rotate it, and so forth. And you'll notice here I have my second text. So here we have our first one, then we have our second one. And depending on if you clicked a bunch like I did, you might accidentally have a ton of them. So we might actually see this one, it's random. I might go ahead and try to get rid of that one. So here we can actually tell the difference. We have this first one, titles and effects. We have this one down here. So I can change this to different fonts. Maybe I want this one to be blue. See if I can change the shadow a little bit. So this is your opportunity to really mess around and get familiar with everything. Don't worry about it looking bad or anything. Pretty much they all end up looking really bad. Some of these are going to be videos, some of them are going to be photos. You'll notice there's some interesting ones. Let me see, like Luma Hearts is really good as far as the texture for blending things over top of each other, so you might play around with some of these. But really you're just looking for enough footage to fill up a minute. Make sure that you have all of these different effects. So color adjustments, transitions, video effects, speed duration. I think that's the last thing that we need to go over. So to do a speed duration, I'm gonna move this over. Actually, this one would be really great for doing the speed duration. So we have this guy playing this accordion dog. So I could go and then right click on it. And this is the easiest way, I think, to do speed duration. There's other ways that you can change the speed. Like if we select this and we go to time remapping, under effects, we can change this too. But I like going here. I can right click, speed duration, it's about halfway. And this is sort of opposite of what I would think it is, but if we do 50%, it makes it longer. If we do 200%, it makes it shorter. Or you can choose a particular duration. So this is about 9 seconds. If I hit 50, now it's 18 seconds. If I do 200, it's 4 seconds long. So that means it'll go a lot quicker. Here we have reverse speed. So I'm gonna hit cancel. Actually, I'll do both. So we'll do speed duration and we'll do 200 to start off with. So we'll make it a lot quicker. And then I'm going to do Control C to copy. And I'm gonna line this up. Something that I don't think I mentioned, but if you hit Shift, this kind of helps snap to certain points. So usually when I'm moving the playhead around, I'll hold Shift and it'll help me snap to a point. I'm going to do Control V to paste it. I'm going to right click on here, go to speed duration. This one I'm going to do reverse speed, and this is actually going to mean that he's going to play the accordion and then he's going to play backwards. So I might not necessarily need this. Instead, what I might do is find like a good loop point. Like maybe I want to cut this here and then maybe cut at this point, remove these, copy this, again I'm going to Shift, paste, right select, go to speed duration, reverse. We can take a look at this now. So it ends up being a little awkward because I have a bit of a pause. I probably have about a frame or something that I need to get rid of because you'll notice it's not quite smooth. There's kind of a judder there. But then maybe I just want him to continually play over and over and over again. I just repeat this. And it'll just kind of loop. All right, so again, 1 minute long, one instance of 2 files over top of each other, just with some opacity setting. You can use a blend mode if you want. Speed duration change, 2 video effects, 4 transitions, titles and credits, and make sure you put those on a document when you submit this file. Submit this directly to Canvas, just export it as a video. So again, we go File, Export Media. Make sure you don't have anything at the end. H.264. We can do 720. Output name, project 2. Save, export. And then you'll upload this directly to Canvas. Create a Word document or something, and then just put a list of those edits.